All right. So the next team we're going to talk about is Tennessee. And like I said, we have them a little higher in our poll, in our rankings than the other two polls. They lost Kennedy Chandler, John Fulkerson, who was not a pro level type player, at least not NBA level type player, but he was very steady influence for them as a rebounder, interior scorer. They lost a couple other guys, but basically Kennedy Chandler and Fulkerson are the big losses. Incoming is Julian Phillips, who's one of my favorite freshmen in this class. We have him currently 24th on our draft board. He's a top 15 recruit. Of course, we have guest Santiago Vescovi, who was a guest for us this summer. We talked about the Volunteers with him at length. They also have the speedy Zakai Ziegler, who's very much Kennedy Chandler type player. And he was very impressive last year as a backup. And now he's going to be running the offense. And all reports coming out of Tennessee is he looks stellar. They also have Olivier Kamwa, who got hurt last year, but he's a steady interior presence who will offset the loss of Fulkerson. He can rebound, block shots. They also have James Adu, who could be their backup center. He's a top 40 recruit and only a sophomore. Josiah James, of course, is a steady player for that team, great defender. And the biggest addition it would be Tyreek Key from Indiana State, who just I forget who Tennessee played. I think they played somebody pretty good in a exhibition game, and Key put up 26 points. He's been a steady scorer. I think he's scored well over 15 points per game in each of his 3 seasons at Indiana State. So, and then they have Plazovic, Euro Plazovic, who is a beast. He's got an NBA type body. He's a banger and physical, and he'll mix it up with anybody. So, yeah, quite the team we got here, Drew. We talked with Santiago Vescovi this year. He seemed pretty excited about this group, and I just love the mix of there's still, with Phillips gives them a nice injection of youth. I really like how this team is shaping up.
Yeah, this is another team to me that we've talked about big, really solid guard rotations. We talked about the Zags, who I'm assuming the exhibition game you're referencing was Tennessee versus the Zags when they routed my guys by 20.
Oh, right. That's exactly.
That's the one.
Yeah.
And then we talked about, obviously, what UNC's got going. This is another team with an outstanding 4-person wing guard rotation that is very, very strong. And when it comes to making runs in March in college basketball, you need ball handlers. You need people that can reliably run your offense and get their own shot, because in the college ranks, it's not as common in the NBA. You need guys, and they've got 4 of them that I really like. We talked about Vescovi. Rich, we talked about we'd love to see him do a little bit more offensively than just kind of let the 3-ball fly. But in his defense, when you're canning 41% of your threes and you're taking 8-9 a game, it's hard to be overly critical. And when he's one of the best shooters, is
in the
Zakai
country.
Ziegler
In the country.
in the country. That's what I meant. Like, in the country, this guy's is a great shooter. Zakai Ziegler showed, again, great flashes, especially throughout the tournament and their conference tournament out in the SEC. Josiah James is actually, they beat the Zags without him, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, he's hurt.
He wasn't even there. And he is probably their best perimeter defender. Again, steady player, senior, does a little bit of everything. And you need guys like that. Like, guys like that are what hold your team together. And then Tyreek Key injects them with a proven close to 20 point per game scorer. I just looked it up. He averaged 17, 15, and 17 his last 3 years on pretty solid shooting splits, around 47%. Obviously a step up in competition, but when you got 4 guys that all do something a little bit different, but can all really be impactful along the perimeter for you, that really, really helps when rotations get tighter, when crunch time happens, defenses get a little bit more up in your face. And I think this Tennessee team's going to be really good. Losing Kennedy sucks. He was a great player, and he got better as the season went on. But they probably have to be thrilled knowing, yeah, we lost him and we've replaced him with 4 guys that all do different things along the perimeter. Really like this team.
Right. And Phillips is also going to be, he's a versatile defender.
Yeah.
A lot of these freshmen, they're shooting is suspect, but I think he's going to be at least a 35% guy from deep. And he's long, and athletic. And I think Key will be the key in that they finally, I think, have a complement to Vescovi. Last year, when their offense would go stale if Vescovi wasn't hitting, and now they have another option on the perimeter to give them some outside shooting. And Ziegler is like the perfect replacement for Kennedy Chandler. So we'll move on to our number 5 team. Again, another team that we are higher on than the polls, and that's the Texas Longhorns. Now, of course, we talked to, Matthew Postins about Texas, so we won't dwell on them too much, but I just want to say, couple things that we didn't talk about with Matthew was that they have Brock Cunningham, who's kind of like probably never going to play at the pro level or maybe Europe, but he's a tenacious defender. Marcus Carr was a 20-point scorer at Minnesota, but he struggled last year. If he can start to become more efficient, this team will be deadly. Dylan Dessou, not many people know this guy, but before he got hurt at Vanderbilt, this was a guy, this is like a 6'9", 6'10", big guy who can handle and shoot, and he has a nice stroke. And, of course, Timmy Allen, who's Teddy Buckets' brother, Timmy Allen is not much of an outside shooter, but he is a mid-range, master.
Savant.
He'll just get you baskets in the mid-range just like anytime you need them. And then Arterio Morris, who you talked about, Drew, he might be one of the keys, of bringing this team some much needed outside shooting. And of course, Tyrese Hunter, who we already know is a great passer, he started turning on the passing, his shooting started to come along toward the end of last season. And then you add in Dylan Mitchell, who was a top 5 recruit, 5-star guy. Now, right now, Mitchell is somewhat limited offensively, but he's athletic and long, and Chris Beard will love him. He'll be on the court a lot to play defense. He's going to get you steals. He's going to defend on the perimeter with his length. He can defend on the interior with his size, block some shots. So, yeah, I really like this team, how it's shaping up. What do you think, Mav?
Yeah, I'm with you. I really like this team as well. What we talked about in the interview with some of their shooting struggles and I could see that as a concern, but with a team that struggled last year to mesh together with as many scores as they have, that would probably be my biggest question mark. We talked about Tyrese Hunter. He really likes to focus on passing, but he's a 27% 3-point shooter. With their struggles shooting already, is that going to hurt them? Is his passing going to be worth it? I'm not sure. They're undeniably talented. They're just top to bottom, they're up there with the best. But again, a team last year that struggled to mesh, it's natural for me to have concerns like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I as I said, I think Morris is going to have to hit at a good clip. He's going to have to be around 37-38% at least. I think Dessou, you want the same from him. Carr, I just don't know. He can create any kind of shot. His problem is efficiency. But if he turns that up a notch, and same with Hunter. But Hunter's young. He's still only 19 years old. So, yeah, I think there's a lot of potential on this team, but they're going to have to find a couple of guys they can count on every game. So one thing we didn't mention, I guess we did mention in the interview that they lost Andrew Jones and Courtney Ramey and Trey Mitchell and Devin Askew. But, none of those guys really played at a super high level last year. So I think this team's better, and it's going to be better just because it's in the second year under Chris Beard. So moving on to a lot of people's favorite to make the Final Four, and with good reason, and that's the Houston Cougars. Of course, the Cougars, they lost Kyler Edwards, Fabian White, Josh Carlton, Taze Moore, 4 starters, okay? But they weren't household names, okay? And this team, as we know, has been consistently overperforming in the NCAA tournament. And now they add Jerice Walker at a forward who can play power forward, small forward, and they get a healthy Marcus Sasser back, who was killing it before he got injured, I believe last December. And they bring in Terrence Arsenault, who's a athletic wing, very much like Taze Moore was, but Arsenault actually can actually shoot, which Moore couldn't. Moore wasn't a very good shooter. Arsenault can. Now, of course, Walker and Arsenault are both freshmen. They're both 19 years old. But this team on paper, they also get Tremont Mark back, who was did very well his freshman year, started and was playing very well at the beginning of last year. He also went down, I believe, actually before Sasser. They lost Sasser and him like within a week or so of each other. So my one concern with this team is height. They don't have a lot of height. Last year, they had Carlton and Fabian White to grab the boards and block the shots. And, this year they're going to be relying on Juwan Roberts and Xavier Francis. Those guys are more rebounding types. They're more like undersized power forwards, let alone center. So they don't really have a true center on this team. And that's my main concern. Drew, you have any comments on the Cougars?
Love them. Second favorite team in college basketball because of the way they play. Big Sampson fan. I think he's going to be coach of the year because of what you said, Rich. Lose 4 starters, all of them in that double-digit scoring range. And I still think this team has Final Four potential. I mean, we've got them at number 6. If they are in the top 10, I think he's going to get it because you look at this roster and outside of Sasser, it's who's that? Oh, I don't know who that is. I'm unaware who this guy is. Getting back Sasser alone is a huge boon. I mean, the guy was killing it. Not the greatest level of competition in sample size, I'll admit. But having recently done a scout on him and creating a video edit on him, this guy has one of the best offensive guards in college basketball. I mean, pull up threes, in transition runs, get to a spot, can set his feet, let it rip, off the dribble, can get to the basket. He's a sneaky athlete. And the thing that people don't talk about is that he's a good defender because he has to be in this system. He's not an elite on-ball stopper. You're not putting him on another team's best player and taking him away, but Sampson demands effort to get onto this court. You are going to have to play hard, and you are going to have to play fast, and you're going to have to play with intensity. It's like controlled chaos. And teams like this really thrive in that. Like, you don't need to be the most polished offense when you're tipping passes, jumping passing lanes, coming down the rebounds, crashing offensive glass. You don't need to be able to shoot because you're going to get easy buckets at the expense of the other team. So I love how I'm just previewing in my head how they're going to play and how they're going to be coached, and looking at this roster. Perfect. I also scouted Terrence Arsenault. I didn't see the jump shot. I only scouted 1 or 2 games of his. So, again, part of that could be it was early in his season. Didn't get a chance to kind of recap and see. But, man, the physical tools, very enticing. This is a type of guy that he's going to need to stay more than 1 year. He's not offensively ready to make any sort of pro jump. But, man, this kid in 2 or 3 years, especially if he maybe grows another inch or 2, this kid's going to be a defensive force and a nightmare for the opposition in this system. I think he's got all the tools to be a lockdown defender. He's, last I checked, 6'6", 6'7". So this is the Sasser show. He's going to be a huge driving point of their offense. So the risk is, as he goes, is how their season will go. If he can be in that 23, 24 point per game category, knockdown 3-point shooter, I think everything else will fall in place around him. If he struggles to come back from that foot injury, the offense could be an issue against top-tier teams who take care of the ball.
Yeah.
So we'll see.
I mean, they definitely need him to stay healthy.
Yeah. But I love the team, and they're going to play hard. And in college, that counts for so much. That counts for so much because the talent gap is generally a little bit smaller because, the talent's more spread out because there's so many more teams and rosters. So a healthy Sasser with a great coach who's going to they're probably the one team I would never want to play. like at any situation because they could catch you with your pants down, and then because
because
you're running for your life.
don't know whether you're going to break 60 on them.
Yeah, exactly. I would not want to play these dudes.
Right, Maverick.
I just want to add a little small comment. I understand that the lack of size is an issue, but with the coach and Sasser, I think that like a smaller lineup is really going to play to this team advantage. I think the offense is going to be much more fluid, and I think their defense is going to be a lot more versatile. I love this team. I just wanted to say that.
Right. I just wonder if you run up against a Baycott or a Timmy or somebody like that. Are they going to have do they have the rim protection? I know Roberts and Francis are really good rebounders and they're really good overall defenders, but they're just not centers, but one guy we didn't mention, one of the best playmakers in the country, and he's only a junior, 20-year-old junior, and that's Jamal Sneed. And he's a tenacious defender too. And Houston now is getting Arsenault and Walker, 2 top 40 recruits. Okay, this is new for Houston in this era. Okay, there used to be a time where big time players went to Houston when Guy Lewis coached the team, and Clyde Drexler. They used to get guys like that. Right.
Slamma-jamma.
And even before then, Otis Birdsong, and they always seem to have at least one or two like All-American type players. Elvin Hayes back in the 60s. That is starting to come back to Houston. This program is just going up, up, and up, and this may be their year.
This Houston, not similar play style, not similar coaching philosophy, but they're starting to become like the Gonzaga route of they just build a very strong culture. They keep their guys in the system for 3-4 years, and now you're starting to see that 5-star, 4-star talent coming. What you see with the Zags, they got Suggs, and then they got Silas, and they got Chet, and they got Hickman, and now you're getting Terrence. You're getting Terrence, you're getting Walker. This team and this program, they're just going to go up with Sampson at the helm.
Yep. By the way, I'm going to rewind a little bit. I forgot to mention the big matchups for a few of the teams. Tennessee, going back to number 4, their first big matchup is against Colorado. Colorado is looking at a down year for Colorado, but still, it'll be their first significant matchup. That's November 13th for Tennessee. Texas's first big matchup is against Gonzaga on the 16th of November. Gonzaga is starting off with a hellacious schedule, but of course they have to compensate for the West Coast Conference. And then, of course, Houston's first matchup is at Oregon, against Oregon on November 20th. So next up on our board is UCLA. They lose Johnny Juzang and Jules Bernard, Cody Riley and Miles Johnson, both of their 2 centers. They had a 2-center system. Riley is now playing in Europe, still eligible for the draft. Miles Johnson is also eligible for the draft, but he's decided to, quote unquote, retire from basketball. I wouldn't be surprised if we see Miles back. Very talented rim protector, should be able to make good money in Europe at a minimum. Might be a little too slow for the NBA. And, of course, Peyton Watson, who was a first-round pick but didn't really do much for the Bruins last year. So what they have coming in this year and returning, of course, they have Jaime Jaquez, who is just an all-around, Swiss Army knife type of guy, plays great defense, rebounds, can do a little bit of everything. They have Jalen Clark, who basically beat out Watson for to be the first guy off the bench last year. This is be his year to shine, and I think he will. Of course, they have Tiger Campbell, one of the better playmakers in the league. And joining that group is Amari Baylor, who's a dynamic combo guard.
Bailey. Amari Bailey.
What did I say?
Baylor.
Oh, excuse me. Yeah, and they have Amari Bailey coming in. He was a top 10 recruit. He's a big combo guard, very dynamic. And they have Adam Bona, who is a international player, and highly regarded internationally, mind you. A traditional center like the guys he's replacing, but he also was a top 20 recruit. And lastly, they have a top 50 recruit in Dylan Andrews, who is the heir apparent to Tiger Campbell. So this team also has some other players, some high recruit type of guys like Max Etienne, Abramo Kanika, Willie McClendon, who's been struggling with injuries for last 2 years. So there is more depth, but it's not proven. So I think that's why UCLA, I think we're pretty sure Bailey's going to be a good player. I think we're pretty sure Bona's going to be a good player. But there's a lot of ifs here. You also need Clark to take the next step up. So UCLA definitely has Elite 8 potential, but I don't know about Final 4 potential. What do you think, Drew?
I'm low on this team. Not so low that not that they shouldn't be. Like, they're a tournament caliber team. They 100% are a threat to make a run. Amari Bailey, like I said, pretty sure he's going to be good. I've seen him play. He's out here on the West Coast. He played down south. I've seen him. Kid looks like he's the real deal. Mm-hmm. But admittedly, I don't know a lot about Dylan Andrews. I've heard of Bona. Like, I've heard of him because he's coming out to the West. But I love Tiger Campbell. I think he's one of the best playmakers. He's the type of player. He does all the small things to win you a basketball game. Takes a charge, dives on the floor, makes the right pass, can hit a big three. He's also like 5'10". So,
right.
I'm always worried with the size, but he's a great basketball player. And I've never been really sold on Jaime Jaquez. I think he's a good player, but he's not like a great scorer. He's like at that 13 points per game is where he was at last season. He can't shoot from three, really. He plays, he's like a tweener. He's not super big, but he likes to play with his back to the basket. It's not that works if you have a Drew Timme or like an Oscar Tshiebwe where you're like, or a Baycott where it's like he cannot be stopped. He's going to score 9 times out of 10 down low. I feel like Jaquez, without the elite athleticism, can't really space the floor. Good player, but I mean, he's de facto your best player as it stands with your most tournament experience. I just feel like Bailey is the big X factor. If he comes in and has a monster freshman year, and just putting up numbers, I'm not trying to compare the players, but like he comes in and has like a Banchero or a Jabari Smith effect where he comes in, you're like, this kid is one of the best players in the country as it stands, scoring 17, 18 a game. Then all bets are off. But I'm not a big Jalen Clark guy. I didn't really see it last year. I mean, he was effective from the field, but is he going to be able to take that next step? This is a team that I really think, in my opinion, ever since that Final Four run and that epic game with Gonzaga has been kind of overrated. And it's kind of hurt the view of them. Like last year when they came in and they were like the number 5 team in the nation, and then they just completely were not.
Everybody was returning.
Yeah. But again, I think they just were a perfect case of solid players who got hot at the right time and came back to earth. And I just think losing Juzang, Peyton Watson would have been a great returner this year because this would be a great chance for him to take over. But you lose Juzang, you lose Bernard, who are, in my opinion, your two best scorers, versatile scorers. You're just putting a lot on Bailey to step up. Teams are going to be much more keyed in on Jaquez and Campbell. And if one of those two guys falter even the slightest and Bailey's just okay, this team, I think, will underperform. But the talent is there. Talent is there.
Right. I also think, though, they're going to benefit from a down year for the Pac-12.
Agreed. If they can get the ship right, if they can use the down year in the Pac-12 to get the experience, get the young guys up to speed, Campbell does what he does and just makes the right plays, and Jaquez maybe can get the three ball going a little bit just to be a little bit more versatile and not basically eat possessions in the post for some of these younger guys, then maybe they get to the tournament and they're ready to roll.
Right. UCLA's first big matchup will be against another top 20 team in Illinois, who we will talk about later. That's at the Continental Tire main event, which is in Vegas. I agree with your analysis. One thing I will say about Jaquez is I don't think you'll find a player in the country that plays harder than him.
Fair. That's fair.
So now we're going to move on to another team who's kind of one of our favorites because we have a friend on the team in Baylor Shireman. Baylor interviewed with us last year, and before he transferred to Creighton. And what a starting five this team has. I mean, they made a run without two of these guys who got injured, one during the tournament, one before the tournament. And Creighton, who they have is we'll start at point guard. They have Ryan Nebhard, who's the younger brother of Aaron. They have Trey Alexander at shooting guard, who really came on when Nebhard got hurt last year. They have Shireman, who basically was a point guard, or kind of a point forward at South Dakota State. And he's a do-everything type of guy who impressed some people at the G League, impressed a lot of people, actually, at the G League elite camp before the draft. He ultimately pulled his name out. Then they have Arthur Kaluma, who we have as a top 20 player right now on our draft board. He really emerged. He's a power forward, emerged at the end of last season, showing the ability to shoot, rebound, block shots, play defense. And he's probably looking at potentially player of the year in the Big East. And then they have Ryan Kalkbrenner, who got hurt during the tournament. And this guy is huge, has great footwork in the post. He's a very efficient interior scorer, shot blocker, rebounder. So we're talking about a very solid starting five. And then we run into questions. So that's my main concern with Creighton. And the two guys they lost last year, too, they weren't a great shooting team, and they arguably lost their two best shooters from last year, and Ryan Hawkins and Alex O'Connell. Neither of them, I mean, they both averaged, Hawkins was around 14 points a game, O'Connell was around 12 points a game, and they were mainly jump shooters. So Shireman, though, he shot well over 40% from three-point range, so that helps right there. But they're going to need both Alexander and Nebhard to pick up their three-point game, and Kaluma too. Kaluma, all these guys got better as the season went on last year, and they're going to need to continue that trend. Any comments from anyone?
I think this team's got a lot of really, really solid talent. I think Baylor Shireman, another guy who went from mid-major made that jump to not a Power Five, but like a real basketball, a high-level basketball conference. I mean, this team on paper, you love everything they've got. I mean, they're not young. You know, you look at all their main contributors are going to be in that sophomore, junior, senior range for the most part, but you kind of want that for a team that's looking to make a run. Yeah. I mean, Shireman gives them a legitimate kind of get the ball, get out of the way kind of scorer. I think Arthur's going to be their best player just in terms of he's going to do everything for them. You know, is he going to be a 20-point per game scorer? No, but if he gives you 14, 15, crashes the glass.
I think he'll do better than that. I think he'll get at least 15.
Yeah, if he's in that 15, 16 range while giving you great defense, crashing the glass, I mean, he's super versatile. I mean, I wasn't really aware of him until they kind of came on late, and just watching, like, oh, this guy legit is guarding all over the court, making an impact. I like this team a lot. I'm just a little bit worried that if injuries bite them again,
right,
very, very quickly, things could fall, especially with the shooting. If, knock on wood, if anything were to happen to Baylor, you go, where's the offense going to come from? Where's the shooting going to come from? But I don't like to project injuries. From what I'm seeing, this team definitely has top 10, Sweet 16, even Elite Eight potential.
They have to.
But they have to. Exactly. They have to. But I don't want to put that out there and be like, oh, I can't rank them because they're going to get hurt. If they stay healthy, this is an Elite Eight team. Yeah. At least that starting five is. If they stay healthy.
Maybe even Final Four.
You never know. Yeah.
Mav, you have any comments on Creighton?
One little comment: Shireman is a 47% three-point shooter.
Yeah, Jesus,
wow. He is. That is incredible. I mean,
at high volume
too. So he's exactly what they needed. That's what I wanted to say.
Good point, and I agree. All right, so Creighton's first big game will be against Texas Tech on November 21st in the Maui Invitational. So now we move into the freshman-laden Arkansas team, who just got walloped by Texas in an exhibition game. Their youth showed. Now, some might say we have Duke right behind them, and why do you have Arkansas ahead of Duke? Well, my argument would be, well, at least Arkansas has some quality veterans. And Trevin Brazil, who had a great freshman season, he's a forward. Had a great freshman season for Missouri last year. They have Devontae Davis, he's now a junior. And, if Devontae could ever get a shot down, because he's a great perimeter defender, combo guard, he would be a potential All-American if he could actually make some shots. And then, of course, they have Ricky Council, who's been a very steady, very productive player at Wichita State. Now, what really makes Arkansas impressive is their freshman class, which is loaded. And I can't list everybody. They had so many good players that they recruited this year, but the top 3 were all top 20 recruits. And they are in order: Nick Smith, who's a combo guard, more of a shooting guard, but he can run the offense. Anthony Black, who's a huge point guard at 6'7", and Jordan Walsh, who's a versatile forward, small forward, could probably even play power forward, probably could even play shooting guard. These guys are all ultra talented. The problem that Arkansas had against Texas was they just kicked the ball all over the place. They almost had 30 turnovers in the game. And Smith, that's been one of the criticisms with him. He's very much one of those guys, it's give me the ball, get out of the way type of guy, and he will take some crazy shots, and a lot of them go in. But, we're talking off balance, really deep, from the logo type shots, but he also can play out of control. So this team has to rein in their athleticism, and Musselman's got to get them on the right path here. Who they're missing from last year, by the way, are some solid players. J.D. Notae, who averaged close to 20 points a game for him last year. Stanley Amudier, who's been on the show. Stanley was an all-around performer, kind of a wing, but he even played power forward for Arkansas. And, of course, Jalen Williams, who was a great interior scorer, passer, led the nation in taking charges. Jalen Williams is the kind of guy you just want on your team, and they're all gone. And who they have playing the bigs this year are the Mitchell twins. And if you follow college basketball, these two guys, both about 6'10", 230 pounds or so. They were highly touted, and they've kind of bounced around, transferred around, and now it's time for them to put up or shut up, because Arkansas definitely needs their height, their shot blocking, and their rebounding, because this team otherwise is pretty small.
I am really concerned about this squad. And it's no knock. I think Musselman's a really good coach. I think he's one of the more underrated coaches in college basketball. Look at what he's done in Arkansas last 2 years in the tournament, bumped the Zags last year. But you talked about 3 outstanding freshmen. I've seen Anthony Black play, scouted him as well. They didn't have him playing point guard, so he looked a little off because I don't think he knew what to do without the ball. But when I saw him on his game, kid can play. And then Nick Smith, obviously, I think he was number 3. Yep. Was it right, Rich? Number 3. Yep. And then Jordan Walsh had some big games, strong kid. But you're replacing J.D. Notae, Stanley Amudier, and Jalen Williams, veteran players, guys who know the system, know what it takes to win at the highest level, with 3 highly touted recruits. And my only fear is if Musselman can't rein those 3 in, and this turns into kind of like, hey, this is our show, and this is going to be our all-star, this is an all-star appearance. This is just an audition for the NBA for those 3, because I'm assuming for sure Nick and for sure Anthony are probably thinking NBA one and done. I would say, given on their rankings, that's probably where their head's at.
Well,
we'll see about Jordan.
Smith for sure. Smith
for sure. But I'm sure Anthony being like, hey, I'm a top 20 guy. I'm a 5-star too. Like, he's probably thinking the same thing as it stands. That's a big on the court mindset change to go from 3 guys who are like, this is probably it. This is our run. This might be the last time we play the highest level of basketball we can get to. We'll see. To 3 guys who are probably already starting to think about the future. I'm just worried that some of the issues you've already seen they get reined in, but not enough so that when the Zags come knocking, or Tennessee comes knocking, or UCLA comes knocking, that they're going to be able to right the ship and, and get it corrected. I'm just really worried. I think 9 is like, I see the talent's there to be a top 10 team for sure. Is the execution going to be there?
I agree. I mean, you always worry when you have this many freshmen running a club. Maverick?
So I was able to scout Jalen Williams, and I was able to watch some of Arkansas's games. And how you describe Nick Smith is very similar to what JD Notae was like. Now,
well, Notae though wasn't a great shooter. Smith loves to take the
but Notae loved to shoot.
Oh yes,
he loved to shoot. The thing I want to point out is that system worked for that team. Everyone in that lineup was unselfish. They were playing hard, especially Stanley Amude and Jalen Williams. Those guys, they were willing to put their body on the line to win every night. It's going to be an internal struggle between the freshman and the coach, because if you have one guy wanting to run the show, sort of like Notae, the other guys are also going to want the ball, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Well, for sure.
They're losing 4 out of their 5 starting lineup guys from last year. They're replacing with freshman Anthony Black, Jordan Walsh, obviously Nick Smith. These guys are all NBA prospects, and they're going to want to show out for the NBA. So there's going to be a struggle there. Either the system's going to have to change, or there's going to have to be a mindset change with those players if they really want to win.
Right. This is a new problem for Arkansas that Duke and Kentucky deal with every year.
Yep.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So this team's first real test would be Louisville. I expect Louisville to start to slowly bring their program back. I expect them to be better than they were last year, which is not saying a lot because Louisville is pretty bad. Worst Louisville team I can ever remember. And they will meet up on November 21st in the Maui Invitational. So next we have Duke at number 10, and what Duke, of course, loses is Paulo Banchero, Wendell Moore, huge contributors. Trevor Keels was a big contributor. Mark Williams was a huge contributor, especially as a rim protector. A.J. Griffin. So they basically lost it was pretty much their starting lineup, except for Jeremy Roach did start a fair amount of games last year. What they bring in is Duke's version of the Fab Five. And they have their top 5 recruits. I don't know if they are all 5-star guys, but they're damn close if they're not.
They're all 5 and 4.
Huh?
All 5 and 4. I think Mitchell and Proctor are 4s.
Yeah, right. And all of them are top 30 recruits, including and 3 of them are top 5 recruits. And we have Derek Whitehead, a wing, smooth wing. This guy, and also has like NBA ready body. Mm-hmm. You have Derek Lively, who's a slender center. And then you have Kyle Flapowski, who kind of another Matthew Hurt. He's a little physically bigger, but he has that kind of game where he can post up with some nice footwork, but also has a nice smooth jumper. Point guard Tyrese Proctor, and he's probably going to be the odd man out of the starting lineup, maybe because of the returning Jeremy Roach. And then you have Mark Mitchell, who's another versatile forward, could play small forward, power forward. And beside Roach, the only experience they have is Illinois transfer Jacob Granderson, who is nearly 25 years old. Granderson's a nice college player, but I don't think he's going to have a huge impact other than maybe providing leadership. But I don't see him being an impactful player in terms of scoring or defense or anything like that. So, of course, Whitehead and Lively are both injured. Whitehead is the more serious one. He fractured his right foot in late August, and he underwent surgery. And there's no timetable for his return. I believe most estimates have him maybe coming back late December at the earliest. So unfortunately, we're not going to see Whitehead for at least probably the first third of the schedule. So Maverick, what do you make of this Duke's version of the Fab Five?
Well, we talked about some of the issues with Arkansas last time about trying to find a way to balance everything. And Rich, you said that Duke deals with this every year, but the biggest departure,
not at this level, unfortunately,
not at this level, and arguably the biggest departure is Coach K.
Right.
I mean, this is the guy that made everything work. Now you're bringing in a first-year head coach with the Duke version of Fab Five. So yeah, I'm very hesitant to buy into this team. I know they have the talent. Obviously, they have the talent, and Jeremy Roach too is a fantastic veteran point guard who can come in the tournament and provide. But a new head coach, a lot of freshmen, the injury concern already. Yeah, I'm pretty hesitant.
Yeah. And they will be tested right away, by the way, November 15th in the State Farms Champion Classic against Kansas. Drew, what do you have thoughts about this freshman-laden squad?
John Shire better come to play. He is. I'm not saying he's on a hot seat or anything, but this could blow up in his face horribly very quickly because look, you're replacing probably the greatest college coach of all time, one of them. I mean, without a doubt, you're at probably the biggest brand in college basketball. I mean, Duke is a bigger basketball brand than half the NBA, if not most of the NBA. You're bringing in a serious amount of talent. You could argue this is the best class that Duke's had ever. I mean, you're looking at these guys like you got the 4th and the 7th and the 19th. You got, like you said, a version of the Fab Five. They just went to the Final Four. I mean, there's so much pressure on John Shire. And if foot injuries are terrifying in basketball, so if Whitehead, for whatever reason, cannot go or is out longer than we think or is definitely hampered by this, you just lost your best player, or you have a limited version of him, potentially, not praying for that. And it's like you have one guy that's going to probably play significant minutes for you in Jeremy Roach that is like a veteran. And I'm not a Jeremy Roach guy. I think he's like solid, but I don't think he's like a big needle mover. If this all works, this team has the national championship talent, no doubt. But you're asking a first-year coach to rein that in. When he was a player, Duke was a very different system. They were all 3-4 year veterans, and they won a title, but very different. Now, yeah, I think 10 is like the highest I could rank them, and I think that's like kind of the benchmark for them. Top 10 talent, but everything else needs to go right.
Yeah. It's a shame about Whitehead because I'm really high on him. He's 4th right now on our draft board, and I think he has the potential to move higher.
Absolutely.
But can't move him higher until we see him do it, against good competition. So another traditional power, another blue blood is our next team is Kansas. Of course, they lost Ochai Agbaji, Christian Brown, David McCormick, their center, and Remy Martin, who provided a big spark for them in their championship run. And they don't have a lot returning. And the guys that are returning are very young, and most of them didn't play much last year. The 2 guys that did play a lot on that national championship squad is Jalen Wilson, who is a versatile small forward, power forward, great rebounder, good defender, do a little bit of everything, like to see his jump shot improve, not the most athletic guy. And then, of course, you have little Juwan Harris, who did a very good job last year for this team. And he returns a point guard. Everybody else is either going to be a freshman. Well, excuse me. And then they have transfer Kevin McClure, who's a solid player, but not an outstanding player. So he will probably be the 3rd starter. And then the other 2 starters are going to probably be raw freshmen. And that's Grady Dick, who is a top 20 recruit, 5-star guy, great shooter, tremendous shooter, and has nice size. He's like 6'7". And then you have Ernest Uday, who is a traditional center, and he'll, Kansas always has, seemingly a 6'10", 6'11", 7-footer in the middle, and he's the latest version of that. And he is a top 40 recruit. So, but they also have Zach Clements, and what we said to our guest, Matthew Postins, is what I'm worried about with his team is not, we didn't even discuss lack of experience with him, but that's one issue. But also, Dick to me is automatically going to be this team's leading scorer. As a freshman. And they also, and you look at them on paper, you're like, this team's not very athletic. I mean, the most athletic guys are MJ Rice, a top 30 recruit freshman, who probably won't start. KJ Adams, who was a top 75 recruit last year, barely played last year. He's a power forward type, but very athletic. And maybe, those guys do end up starting. And I think that's what's the hope for this team. But even so, you're really, again, this is the third team in a row. We sound like a broken record, but we're talking about a lot of inexperience.
Yeah, I'm looking back. I mean, it looks like the AP and the coaches poll had this team coming in at 5.
Yeah.
No way in hell. No way. There's no way. Their best returning player is Jalen Wilson, who I like. Like, I do like Jalen Wilson. I think he's a solid player. But is Jalen Wilson ready to become the leader on a top 5 team?
Right.
No way.
He's very much a Jaime Jaquez type of guy.
Exactly. And I have the same reservations about that. He's not really a shooter. He's okay from the field. I think he averaged like 12 points a game last year. Is he a good college player? Do you want him on your roster? Absolutely. Do I want him being my best player? Probably not. Grady Dick, do I want him to come in and de facto be my best guy? I mean, if he was the number one player in the country, if he was coming in as the number one guy, a la like a Nick Smith or an Amari Bailey, maybe you're like, okay, maybe he just dominates and carries this team. I don't see that with him. Is he a good player? Absolutely. Is he going to come in and automatically be putting up 25 points a game? And I just don't see it. I think 11 looking at his height, not to mention that they have that self-inflicted punishment on self, I believe, where he's not going to coach the first 4 games or something like that.
Oh, I forgot about that.
Like this team could start. And I mean, if we're talking about them playing Duke on November 15th, and they're not going to have their coach possibly. I don't know where that falls in their schedule, but I just
early
don't
on. I mean, that's only it's less than 2 weeks from now.
Exactly. It's probably going to be one of their first 4 or 5 games. Maybe they get self back. I don't know, but your coach might not be there. You lost a lot. Your best returning player is more of a third or fourth kind of option guy, kind of a glue guy, do a little bit of everything. And your kind of de facto best player on paper is a freshman who is good, but not one of the like transcendent freshmen, like, oh, that's a one and done NBA prospect ready to go. Putting this team at 5, I think, is really unfair to some other teams. And yes, you kind of have to give them the benefit of the doubt. Like they're Kansas, they have the coach, and they do have some
returning national champs.
But man, I think this team is I think this, out of all the teams we've talked about, this might be the team that disappoints. And I'm like a fool. Maybe Self gets these guys rolling and they go on and they make the Elite 8, but I don't see it.
The strength of this team is Bill Self.
Yeah. I just don't see it. I do not see a team that's even remotely close to contending. They lost way too much and did not replace enough.
Right. So another Big 12 team who our guest predicted would win the conference, that's Baylor. And they lost James Akinjo, Matthew Meyer, Kendall Brown, and Jeremy Sohan. So that's significant losses. Yeah. On the plus side, they still seemingly might have the best group of guards in the country in Keontae George, who was a top 10 recruit, LJ Cryer, who was leading the team in scoring before he went down injured, Adam Flagler, who Matthew Poston told us is going to start at the point, which I thought was interesting. And he is a knockdown shooter. And Langston Love, who is injured all of last year, he is a top 40 recruit and was highly regarded and thought to be, the next great Baylor guard, and then they bring Keontae George right in after him. So, at guard, this team is loaded. They also got Jalen Bridges, who a transfer from West Virginia, who I think is very underrated, versatile forward, who really hasn't fully tapped into his potential, and he could emerge this year. But my concern, and we talked about this with Matthew Poston, was Jonathan Chachua, may miss, probably won't be back until after January, February, it's looking. Mm-hmm. I wouldn't be surprised if we're talking about, he totally blew up his Achilles. Maybe we don't see him at all this year. And that leaves, Flo Thamba, as a starting center. He's a good defensive rebounding center. And they also have a couple transfers that Matthew Poston talked about. But Maverick, Matthew Poston says they're going to win the Big 12. What do you think?
I really have one big reservation with this team. I think when we talk to Matthew, Keontae is going to be great. They obviously have their guard depth, but on paper, their size is pretty noticeable. Their top three, like their point guard, shooting guard, and small forward, are likely going to be under 6'5", and I think that might play a big factor. I understand how well Baylor plays in their system; it's fantastic. I don't think that's a question. But when you have Flo Thamba, he's going to be the guy that you really rely on, even though he's not bad on defense. He's
a good defender, but
is he someone that we can rely on?
He can't play every minute either. He's not going to play, and they don't really have a center behind him.
I think that's probably my biggest concern. I don't think the offense is a concern at all. I think it's that right there. It's the size and then ultimately the defense.
Right. Chachua, by the way, was injured at the end of February. So the end of February, if he comes back early February, that'd be less than a year from an Achilles injury, and we know how that works. Actually, I stand corrected. It wasn't an Achilles injury. He tore up his knee. I think he tore his ACL, multiple ligaments, including his ACL. So, but that's actually, believe it or not, ACL injuries these days are usually quicker to recover from than Achilles. So, Kansas's first big matchup, Baylor's first big matchup will be against Virginia on November 18th at the Continental Tire main event in Vegas. So moving on, we have Auburn. Bruce Pearl's team lost Jabari Smith, of course, who was top 3 pick in the NBA draft. Walker Kessler, who was, I believe, top 20 pick, just outside the lottery. And also Devin Cambridge, who was a solid reserve. They bring in some new faces, including Janiah Broome. Janiah comes over from Morehead State, where he was just stellar last year, shot 56% from the field, averaged 10.5 rebounds a game, and 3.9 blocks a game. And I saw Janiah play multiple times last year. Very impressive. Of course, playing at Auburn is much different than playing at Morehead State. But I am a believer that his game will translate. The biggest thing, and this is something he has been working on, and he needs to obviously add this to his game, because he's really got a power forward body. Right now he's 6'10". They say he's 235. That seems to be stretching it. He's kind of thin, I thought, last year, but he needs the outside shot. But I think if he starts hitting the outside shot, you're looking at a potential NBA draft pick. They also have Alan Flanagan, who before he was injured, he was a guest on our show this summer. And Alan, before he tore up, I believe I don't know if his was Achilles or knee, but
I think it was knee.
Okay. But before his injury, he was considered a potential first-round pick. Then Auburn has those two speedy little guards in Wendell Green, who will shoot from anywhere on the court, and Katie Johnson, who's more of a distributor, attack the rim type of guy. They have incoming freshman top 40 guy and Chance Westry. They also have Johan Tare, who was a top 30 recruit, who's a center power forward type guy. So yeah, Westry is considered, their big guy coming in terms of freshmen. He injured his knee in early October and was said he should be healthy in about a month. So that puts him right about now. So I think he's questionable whether he'll be ready to start for the season. But, on paper, this team, obviously they lose two huge front court pieces in Jabari Smith and Walker Kessler. But the backcourt guys return. Alan Flanagan should be better, with another year to recover, because he kind of came back sooner than there were people who thought last year that Alan Flanagan wouldn't play, and he played poorly. He clearly wasn't himself. But if Alan Flanagan returns to the Alan Flanagan of old, Janiah Broome can translate. If he can play somewhere close to what he did at Morehead State, we're looking at a pretty damn good team here.
Yeah, I think the thing that's going to surprise people is this is the first roster we've come across that doesn't have any star power. These aren't names that jump off. You go, oh, that's a really prime high school recruiter. Oh, that's a National Player of the Year candidate. I do want to correct myself. Flanagan did tear his right Achilles, which is a little bit more concerning because that injury is kind of the kiss of death across pro sports generally in terms of athletic ability. But I mean, this is a team that I think it's veteran coach who has had some really good success recently. They made that Final Four run a few years ago, got two guys to the NBA as top tier picks, won a couple games in the tournament. I think this team, 13 is kind of right where they're at. I don't know if they'll ever creep into that top 10 because I don't think they have enough proven takeover kind of star players. But I think that 20 to 15, 20 to 13 range is where they're going to live all season because they're deep. There's a lot of juniors and seniors on this roster. Flanagan doesn't need to be perfect. He just needs to come back and be 75% of what he was. I hope Westry is able to recover. I mean, you never want to hear knee, and I get a little bit scared. And even 3 to 4 weeks, I'm like, yeah, but are you going to be? It's probably 3 or 4 weeks so you can play, but probably another 3 or 4 weeks so you're back to back to form. So he's more realistically probably going to be really picking it up closer to the turn of the new year. But I like this team. And I think this team's going to be one of those kind of pesky outs where you're playing them and they're just going to play good basketball. They're going to be coached well, coached hard. And you're going to be like, damn, Auburn just doesn't go away. Because unlike some of the teams we've mentioned where there's too much youth, there might not be enough on this team, especially if Westry's not 100%. But that does bode well for, playing high-level basketball that's going to sometimes overcome the teams that are a little bit more talented.
Right. Mab?
Yeah, I just wanted to add a little quick point. I also think the team looks really good. It's losing Jabari Smith and his just ridiculous efficiency. I think it's going to hurt, especially in the beginning. But as long as this team plays as a team, they play like a cohesive basketball on both ends of the floor. I think that 13 is a good spot, but I could easily see them going past this if Bruce Pearl just gets them together and just really brings them together and mesh well.
Yeah. I mean, clearly replacing. I mean, Janiah Broome, I don't think he's going to – Kessler was like 4 or 5 block shots a game, sometimes 10 block shots a game. I mean, Janiah Broome is a very athletic big, but I still don't think he's going to block shots like Kessler. And, of course, Jabari Smith is just nobody on this roster that matches up to his overall ability as a shooter and defender. So I don't think this team is as good as it was last year. I think that's pretty obvious, but still the pieces are for it to be a very good team. Their first big matchup will be November 27th against St. Louis, who is a underrated mid-major. So next is Auburn's rival, Alabama at number 14. And we have Jaden Shackelford, Keon Ellis, and J.D. Davidson are the three main pieces they lose. That's basically, their starting backcourt kind of. Sometimes Davidson actually would come off the bench, but toward the end of the season, I stand corrected, because Javon Quinterly was the regular starter. He got hurt in the NCAA tournament, and he is not due back until, when is he due back? December, they say, sometime in December. That seems a little quick to me, because he got injured in March. I just don't think we're going to. Quinterly's game relies on speed, quickness, changing direction, changing speeds. That's a lot to ask for somebody coming off an ACL. I'm really surprised they're saying December. I wouldn't be surprised to see that get pushed back. What this team does have is their best freshman is Brandon Miller. Brandon is nearly 20 years old, so he's got at least a year on most freshmen. He was a top 15 recruit. Lanky, small forward type, can definitely handle the ball, shoot off the dribble, and I think he's probably going to be this team's leading scorer. Charles Bediako, who played very well last year as a freshman, as a shot blocker, rim protector, he's back. They also add in Jaden Bradley, who was a top 25 freshman coming in at point guard. Of course, they'll have Quinterly at some point. Then they have Namari Burnett, who has been injured for the last couple of years, but he too was a top 40 recruit, and definitely could be a significant player for this team as a 3-and-D type. And then we have Mark Sears coming in transferring in from Ohio, and Sears put up some huge numbers last year at Ohio. Now, again, level of competition, but got to keep that in mind. But he poured in 19.7 points per game, 6 rebounds a game, and 4.1 assists per game. So, but he also averaged 3.2 turnovers per game. That's a high number. But, I know a lot of Alabama people are high on Sears. I have some reservations about how good he's going to be. And I don't think it's really been determined yet whether the freshman Bradley or Sears is going to start at the point. I would assume Sears gets this early nod, and then maybe Bradley, comes on later. And of course, then you have Quinterly could even be in the mix. So they could actually have 3 point guards on the team. And of course, we know that Nate Oates is not shy about starting multiple guards. So, Drew, you have any thoughts on this Alabama team?
I guess just Quinterly, in my opinion, there's no way he's back in December. This will be an injury that keeps him out into the new year. You rush him back now, you risk not so much re-injury. I understand that, that could happen. I'm not really worried about that, but why rush a guy back when he's not going to be able to play 100%? Especially a guy like Quinterly who's been around. He's going to demand the ball, need the ball. And so you take, I just don't understand the idea of rushing back. We talk about people heal quicker, modern medicine, all that. ACL used to be a year minimum. Now maybe you can push it to 8-9 months, maybe 10. But I'm why are you going to rush him back? I just think it's a bad idea. Not only do you increase his risk of injury, but if he doesn't come back, he doesn't play well. Now you're dealing with maybe there's a mental block. And it just seems like there's a lot that can go wrong with that. Give him more time. It won't hurt. This team is definitely a lot deeper than they've been in the past. And then also we didn't really talk about him, but Rylan Griffin, another guy that I scouted, probably won't be a huge factor on this team, maybe because Quinterly's out for a while. Maybe he does get in there, but I think this is a kid to keep an eye on. Super smooth, 3-level scorer, kind of lanky, long, but man, I watched him play and again, saw him go up against Keontae George and Ontario Morris, looked the part. Really, really nice jump shot. I mean, he was hitting from all three levels. I think this kid, maybe not this year, but definitely someone who will probably be back for at least 2 more years. Someone to keep an eye on. He's definitely an offensive threat. Needs to get better defensively, but he can play.
Right. Mav?
Yeah, I like this Alabama team. They're much deeper. They have some of their top scorers returning. They have solid. I mean, top freshmen coming in. And here's the thing about Sears. He played at Ohio, and he's not going to put up the same points per game. But what I'm concerned about is his efficiency. He shot 41% from three. If he can keep that up, that is going to be the key for him. Because he's not going to get the same shot attempts, and he's probably not going to get the ball as much. But if he keeps his efficiency, that will be the key for his own individual success, and will really help Alabama as well.
Yeah. One more thought on Quinterly is, he was I don't remember which, he went to one of these prep school, super high school type programs. So he was late when he went getting to Villanova. So like when he was a freshman, he was already like 20 years old. And so then he transfers, and I believe he had to sit out a year. So now Quinterly, as a senior, not a super senior, but just a regular senior, is 24 years old, or close to it. And so he probably feels the pressure internally because even though he blew up his knee last year, was considering going into the NBA draft. Now, there was no way he was going to get drafted. He was injured on top of he's never been ultra efficient. But he is a very gifted ball handler, shot creator. So, I wish him the best. It's just, he just hasn't had the best luck. Alabama's first big game, and we keep on running into this team. It will be on November 24th against Michigan State in the Phil Knight Invitational out in Oregon. So now the next team we're going to talk about, I think, would have Final Four potential if there weren't for some many circumstances, which we'll get into, and that's the Villanova Wildcats, a team that I am ultra familiar with. I rarely miss one of their games. And unfortunately, Jay Wright surprisingly retired. And he is replaced by long-term assistant Kyle Neptune, who I believe only has 1 year of coaching experience, last year at Fordham. But more importantly, this team is already banged up. Mainly their two best players, including Cam Whitmore, who was an incoming freshman, top 15 recruit, 5-star guy. He is dealing with an injured thumb, so shouldn't be something that's going to keep him out for a long time. They're thinking that probably by December he'll be back. But he's, as far as I know, he will not be ready for the start of the season. Also, Justin Moore, who tore his Achilles, senior point guard, senior combo guard. It was actually his turn to kind of become Villanova's next point guard, because he would be replacing Colin Gillespie. The team also lost Jermaine Samuels, who's kind of like a versatile forward for the team, but Gillespie is their big loss. But Moore, we have no timetable for his return. He suffered the injury last March, so I wouldn't be surprised if we don't see Justin Moore this year, but he's been doing some work off the court, individual work, taking some shots, doing some lifting, some jumping and exercising, but he's not practicing with the team. So we know Whitmore will play, and he is a very strong physical forward. He likes to shoot, does a lot of work in the mid-range area. I could see him playing anywhere from shooting guard to power forward in small ball lineups. And of course, they have Brandon Slater returning, who's a very capable, steady wing for them. And also they have forward or power forward center Eric Dixon, returning. He's also a steady player. Caleb Daniels, he's dealing with a broken nose, but he's a solid guard. The two high recruits from last year, Jordan Longino and Trey Patterson, come back. Patterson actually was the more heralded incoming freshman, but Longino definitely played better than him. Patterson's more of a forward type. Longino's more of a wing type. So Longino will definitely be in the equation, but the pressure for this team is really on freshman Mark Armstrong, who was in the composite recruiting rankings was number 55. So he's a 4-star guy. He's more of your traditional small Villanova type point guard, not especially dynamic, not especially big, but smart player, good shooter. And obviously he's going to be, as far as I know, unless maybe they want to use Caleb Daniels at point guard, Armstrong will be their starter. So so you throw in the first year coach and the injury to Moore, and that's why we have this team at 15. If somehow Moore would miraculously come back and play at the level that we're used to, this team has Final Four potential, but I think that's asking a lot.
Moore's probably not playing this year. I mean, you're asking him to come back from Achilles. That's probably just not going to happen in this time. It's just, I don't think he plays this year. And then asking a freshman to basically not really see his first college action until a month and a half, 2 months into the season is a lot. And you just replaced a Hall of Fame legend coach with kind of an unknown. It doesn't look great for Villanova, who have long been one of the programs that have seemed kind of impervious to down years. They've always just seemed so steady. This might be too much to overcome.
Matt, do you have any thoughts on the Wildcats?
I just have a little quick pointer. Even if Justin Moore were to return, I don't think he would play nearly at the level he's used to. It's just how it is with Achilles injuries. It's unfortunate, but even if he did return, it would be a completely different Justin Moore.
Yeah. I think, this team would need, it's going to need, they also have, Archidiakono's younger brother on the team. He's gotten some playing time, but he hasn't been overly impressive. And it's, point guard is, such an important position. So your options are, the freshman Armstrong or Caleb Daniels would be playing out of position, or Archidiakono. And I just don't know. But there is a lot of talent on this roster. If you think Trey Patterson will start living up to his potential, and Longino, he already started to show some stuff. And of course, Whitmore, who is a highly regarded recruit in this class. So we shall see. They will be tested early by a overlooked Temple team that's really under Coach Aaron McKee is starting to rebuild that program. And those two meet up on November 11th at Temple. So they are going to be playing a crosstown rival immediately. And trust me, Temple wants to beat Villanova bad. It's just the way those inner city rivalries work out. All right. So next on our list is Arizona. And Arizona, of course, lost Ben Matherin and Christian Coloco, both who have been looking good in the pros. Dalen Terry as well, another high NBA draft pick, hasn't gotten much playing time with the Bulls so far. And Justin Kerr, who was a very reliable reserve. However, this team does have a lot of people coming back, a lot of key players, good players, starting off with Azuolas Tubelis, the stretch four, Omar Ballo, the big center, shot blocking, rebounding center, Kerr Kriisa, who's kind of like shoot it from anywhere. Kerr Kriisa, who's the point guard. They have Courtney Ramey coming in for Texas. Ramey won't be available right away because of a small suspension for playing in the Portsmouth Invitational. And they also have Pell Larson, who mainly came off the bench last year, but he's a very steady, good shooter player. And they have some young talent, too. They have Henri Vesser, I think I'm pronouncing that right, who's highly regarded, power forward, stretch forward type of guy who has some pro experience. I think he's a very underrated incoming freshman. And I think he will be a nice understudy for, under Tabellis. And they also have Kylan Boswell, who was a top 40 recruit, and he's not even eligible for the draft because he's only 17 years old.
17 years old, yeah. Right.
And then they have Adama Ball, who is a combo guard, didn't get a lot of playing time last year as a freshman, but really was very efficient, shot well over 40% from three. Again, he's another international guy that he really didn't show up on the American recruiting service, but very highly regarded in Europe. So I think this team is underrated. I think they definitely can make some noise. They have a nice mixture of experience. Ballo is so underrated. I mean, that guy really, for such a huge man, can play.
Moves well.
Yeah, he moves well, plays good defense,
Wish the Zags held on to him.
Yeah. I mean, it was amazing last year. They play sometimes, they play Coloco and Ballo at the same time. And so they both had to go out in the perimeter at times and they played well. So, yeah, I like this Arizona team. Any thoughts?
Yeah, I think this team, underrated is a good way to describe them. I mean, they kind of have to be because everyone's going to think about last year where they were one of the top teams in the nation. I mean, they had 3 guys get drafted. Mathurin looks like a rookie of the year candidate, and that's gone now. So you're obviously like, oh, well, that's tough. Like, you lose a lot. But the reason they were so good is because they were so deep. I mean, yes, Mathurin and Coloco and Terry were kind of the force of that. But Tabellis is like a really good basketball player that nobody talks about. Like, nobody ever talks about him. And maybe that's because he's not American born. He's not super flashy, but he is a really good player. Ballo is going to slide into that Coloco role, and I think do so very admirably. Sometimes Kerr Kriisa gets a little too crazy. Sometimes he really just likes to let it fly.
Well, definitely.
And that kind of, I'm like, all right, bro, tone it down. But he can hit. And sometimes you need a big shot maker and a big shot taker. Like, there is something to be said about a guy who's willing to rise up and try to make a big shot. And Pelle Larsson, again, super underrated. I think he averaged like 7 or 8 points last year. He was 37% from three. So just a solid kind of floor spacer. And, they're coached well. Like I said, Pac-12 is going to be a little bit down this year compared to last. Yeah, I think this team – their ceiling's not as high, but I think this is a pretty safe bet that they're going to make the tournament and definitely be a threat to win a game or two.
Yeah, I really think the reason why they're underrated is most of these guys are international guys.
I was just saying, they're all a bunch of European white dudes.
And, what's his face? The one guy, the sophomore Ball. Adama Ball, but anyway, I just wanted to read you off Henri Besar's some of his numbers. He played with Real Madrid's under-18 team last year, shot 48% from the field, 39% from three, 71% from the line. Now, this is only on 21 minutes a game, averaged 6 rebounds, 2 assists, almost 2 blocks per 20 minutes, 1.9, and the guy is 6'10". So he's Tabellis, I think is, I don't see him on anybody's draft board. We have him in second round territory. Guy could shoot, guy can rebound. He's not a bad ball handler. So yeah, he had an off year last year to some degree, but he was playing hurt. So I think it's just kind of bias against, people just don't know who these guys are. So their first test of the season will be November November 21st versus Cincinnati and Maui. So, yes. So now we're moving on to some Big Ten teams. And that first one up at 17 is Indiana. Indiana didn't really lose anybody of significance. And of course, they returned Player of the Year candidate and Trace Jackson Davis. Jackson Davis is an amazing interior scorer, can block shots, rebound. The main thing with his game is he still hasn't developed an outside shot, or if he has, we don't see it when he plays. So if Jackson Davis can get an outside shot, he could be a first-round pick. But right now, the guy is also really, he moves well, for like a 6'10" guy. I really like him. I just want to see him make some outside shots. They also have incoming freshman Jalen Hood, who's a combo guard. They also have Malik Renault. Both of those guys are top 30 recruits, freshmen, and Renault is a power forward. And then, of course, they have some holdovers in Race Thompson, who's a gritty, rebounding, tough guy, physical guy. Jordan Geronimo, who's a very athletic forward who really started to come on toward the end of last year. Tamar Bates barely played last year, but he's a 4-star guy, top 30 recruit. If Bates could make a huge leap this year after barely playing last year. And then they have Xavier Johnson, who one night can throw up 20 points and win ball games for you. The next night he can have 10 turnovers and lose a ball game for you. So to me, that's what scares me about this team is Xavier Johnson. He's just so inconsistent. He's not an ideal floor general, and he's not a great shooter either. He has really awkward shooting motion, but there's plenty of talent on this team. And, God help the Big Ten if Jackson Davis, can hit some outside shots and Hood lives up to his potential and Bates and Renault, but again, another one of those teams where what you're really counting on besides Jackson Davis on this team, you're really counting on a couple of these young guys to step forward and be piece number 2 and piece number 3.
This team goes as Jackson Davis goes. That's all I got to say. His Player of the Year candidacy is going to dictate how well these guys do. If he gives them 20 and 10 or 20 and 8, and I think he blocked 2 shots a game, and maybe he can get stretch the court a little bit. If he has a down year or something happens to him, they will be out of the 25. But you got a Player of the Year candidate, and that speaks volumes.
Right. Mav?
2 things. I think this team is going to be determined by, yeah, we know what we're going to get out of Jackson Davis, but I think the guard play is going to be, just as important. And also just shooting. Indiana was ranked 321st in 3-point attempts last year, and they didn't really add anyone who is going to be able to just be a consistent knockdown shooter that can help that. I think that's a concern coming in. But when you have Jackson Davis, it's tough. But if they can get some good guard play from specifically Jalen Hood, if he can be that guard to pair next to Jackson Davis, team's going to be pretty good.
Yeah, and Bates. I wouldn't count him out. He had a rough freshman year, but the kid's got talent. Indiana's first big game will be November 18th in the Gabbett games where the Big Ten and Big East square off, and they will play at Xavier. Next team is also a Big Ten team, and that's Illinois, and they lost quite a bit, including the big guy, Kofi Coburn. They also lost their little shooting guard, or their little guards, and Alfonso Plummer, who was a 3-point specialist, Trent Frazier, who was a point guard. They also lost Andre Cabello, who never quite seemed to get up to speed. He was injured at the start of the year and just never, but he didn't play up to par last year. They also lost DeMonte Williams, who was a regular starter, good defender. But they replaced them with some interesting pieces. Matthew Meyer from Baylor. He is a versatile forward who can light it up at times. Very athletic, capable shooter, but inconsistent at Baylor. Same thing with the next guy, Terrence Shannon from Texas Tech. I mean, Meyer and Shannon both, have NBA first round draft potential, but they're highly inconsistent. And Shannon, really had a poor year last year from at Texas Tech when he was expected to take a big leap. But they do have some other interesting pieces. One is freshman Sky Clark, point guard, and he's going to be needed right off the bat, to play big minutes. But they also had a guy who really quietly came on, super high energy player, kind of a do everything kind of guy. And that's RJ Melendez. No one outside of the state of Illinois is talking about this guy, but we have him in the top 100 on our draft board. High energy guy, really, really capable in multiple ways, offensively and defensively. And also Coleman Hawkins. He was like a 6'10" guy. He's certainly not Kofi, but he can actually hit a shot. He can actually hit a jump shot. So, and he'll grab you some rebounds and block some shots. So not a lot of depth on this team, especially when they lost Luke Good, who was one of their better shooters, or supposed to be one of their better shooters. He broke a foot, and he's not expected to be back for quite a while. So, this team has talent. They also have another top 75 guy in combo guard Ty Rodgers. So it's not the type of team that goes, wow, but I definitely think they're going to be toward the top of the Big Ten. And like I said, there is potential on this team.
Yeah, I agree. I think there's potential. I've never been a big Matthew Meyer guy. I think he kind of broke out 2 years ago, or was it 2 years ago when they won? But I think he was disappointing last year when he took on a bigger role. Mm-hmm. Not overly familiar with some of the other guys on the roster, particularly the incoming freshmen. But I mean, you look at the guys that are returning, and you're like, there's enough talent there that they'll be competitive. I don't know if I see them more maybe in the mid 20s, but I mean, who knows? This is one of the few teams on here that I'm not super familiar with, and I'm just looking at what they lost, and I'm like, that seems like quite a bit to try to replace. But give them the benefit of the doubt. Illinois has been really solid the last couple of years.
Yeah. And their first big matchup. Oh, Mav?
Yeah, I just wanted to add that Sky Clark, I think he's probably an NBA hopeful. If he's going to want to reach that, just like you said, Rich, he's going to have to contribute day one. And that's going to be pretty important for this team.
Oh, yeah. If he doesn't have at least a solid season, this team's going to be in trouble. So their first big matchup will be November 18th. In the Continental Tire main event in Vegas against UCLA. So then at number 19, we have an ACC team that has mostly veterans coming back. They really didn't lose anybody of significance. So Virginia Cavaliers, I think their top player is Reese Beekman, very athletic. He can attack the rim. He can shoot. He can play defense. Good defender. Armand Franklin actually, was somebody I expected a lot more from last year. He was coming off a really nice year with Indiana and was thought to be, up and coming, 3-and-D guy, but he really, he started to play better as the season wore on. So there's hope there. And if he can, I think last year he started the year in our top 200 on our draft board. I know he did. So they do have one interesting freshman in Isaac Trout, who's a very good shooter, very good stretch four. They call him Fish. His name is spelled Traudt. It's pronounced Trout. And he was a top 60 recruit. And then they have some, returners like Jalen Gardner, who's kind of a banger down low. He's a super senior. They also have junior Caden Shedrick, who's even bigger than Gardner, and he's kind of a shot blocker, rebounder. And then, of course, we have the one piece left over from the national championship team, and that's tiny point guard Kie Clark. I'm not a huge Kie Clark fan. I know he's a great playmaker, but he can be a real defensive liability because he is just so tiny, and he's never really developed a great outside shot, which I think it's someone his size, under 6 feet, you really got to be a really good shooter, at least in terms of, thinking pro. But as a point guard, he's already proven that he can lead a national championship team. So, this team doesn't really jump out at you, but it's going to be solid. And if Trout can play kind of like Sam Hauser did for Virginia, I think they're going to be one of the better teams in the ACC.
Yeah, I mean, the thing that people need to remember with Virginia is their bread and butter is defense. Last year they were 6th in the country in defense. And if you kind of remove Jacksonville and North Texas, two kind of lesser known schools from that equation, they jump up to 4th. And I mean, you can even maybe take out Fresno State. So we're talking big programs. It was San Diego State, Houston, and then Virginia. And so that kind of tracks for them. They were always very well.
They're always a top 5
under Bennett. Yeah. Exactly. And so when you return all these guys, defense travels and defense matters. This team does not have national championship upside because they just don't have the star power to get you there. But kind of like how we said with Houston, this is a team I do not want to deal with. I do not want to see because they make life hell. And you're like, okay, maybe we get to 65. And if they have a decent scoring night, all they need to do, their whole game plan is going to be first team to get to 70 wins. Right. And that's going to be how they win games. And I think that will work for them. And I think that while their upside's kind of capped, I don't want to play a Virginia team that's returning, probably have a junior and senior as their top 2 players, have a freshman with some serious upside, and then the rest of the roster is kind of a combination of youth and veterans. And the way that they're coached, I just don't really want to see a team like this. Champions, probably not, but this will be the type of team that you're going to match up against in the tournament or in conference play, and you're going to have a hell of a night trying to deal with these guys. So I've always been a big Virginia guy. Glad to see that, they're still in the top 25.
We are laughing, folks, because Mookie, our mascot, decided to come visit and lick my ear while Drew was talking. So their first matchup will be a really good test from a Baylor squad on November 18th, and Baylor has a lot of firepower. So it'd be interesting, and that will be at the Continental Tire main event. So one of the teams that nobody seems to like but us is number 20 on our list, Xavier. Now, Xavier lost Paul Scruggs, who was a longtime, contributor for them as a point guard, shooting guard. Also lost Dwan Odom, who was a speedy backup point guard, and Nate Johnson, who was kind of a 3-point specialist. But Scruggs is a big loss, but, he, over the last 2 seasons, kind of been in and out of lineup with injuries. So I don't think it's a huge, huge loss. And some of these names you don't know, but they're really good players, including Kobe Jones, who we have rated as a first-round draft pick. Kobe Jones can play, and he can do just about everything, and he might, out of necessity, play point guard for this team this year, even though he's a wing. And I'm a little worried about that for his draft stock, because that could go one of 2 ways. It could solidify him as a first-round pick, or it be adjusting to a new position could just throw him off kilter. But that's the one problem I see with Xavier. They don't have a true point guard. Right now, the other option seems to be Desmond Claude, who is a incoming freshman, not a highly regarded one. And he's got good size for a point guard, but he is, not highly talented guy. And so we shall see. But the other pieces that they have, Jack Nunge, longtime backup for who was Iowa's big guy, Luka Garza. And Nunge can shoot better than Garza. Also have Zach Fremantle, who's kind of a rebounding machine, good inside scorer. So he's kind of like an all Big East type of guy. So, and then they have a collection of wings and guards, including Soli Boom, I believe is how you say it. But he last year played actually for the last played at UTEP for 3 straight years after starting off at San Francisco. In his last 2 years at UTEP, he averaged 19 points a game and 20 points a game. Also shot 1 year he shot 39% from 3, next year 37% from 3. Also a very good foul shooter, well over 80% from the foul line. Give you some rebounds, give you some assists, give you some steals. So it'd be interesting. Obviously, he's moving up in a level of competition, but if Boom can play anything, close to what he did for UTEP, wow. I know we're asking a lot here. We're asking Kobe Jones to become a point guard or this unheralded freshman to become a point guard. But yeah, there's a lot of pieces here to like.
Yeah, this, again, super underrated team. Like, people don't realize Kobe Jones, Jack, and Zach, those 3 guys all averaged north of 11 points. I think they were at like in that 12 to 13 range. Those 3 guys all shot over 47% from the field. In fact, Jack was at like 55% or something. When I was looking him up, he was like well over 50. They all had really solid rebound numbers. They were all around like that 6 to 7 range. Like, these guys are 3 guys who can play basketball, and like you got to have people that you can go to in college basketball. You got to have like a small rotation of kind of trustworthy guys. And all 3 of these guys can do it. I mean, if one of them can just take the jump, maybe get that scoring closer to like the 18 point range, they kind of have a bona fide lead scorer out of these 3. You have a really solid 3-man core. And yeah, if Boom is 80% of what he was before transferring, which is a 15, 16, 17 point per game scorer, that gives you a 4-man rotation that are all in the double digits and are all shooting north of 47%, or at least historically have. You're going to tell me that's not a recipe for some success with one of your guys and Colby Jones being on NBA draft radars, and maybe he breaks out. Could it go the other way for them? Sure. Colby maybe doesn't adapt well to the new change and it hurts his game, but I'm just looking at that top 3 of 3 upperclassmen. All of them rebound well. All of them score effectively. They're all double-digit scorers. You bring in a guy that has the potential to give you another scoring punch that could be in that 18 to 20 point range if he stays the same. And if he gets a little bit worse, he's still an effective scorer. I mean, that's what you need in college basketball. You need, as I've always looked at it, it's a simple metric, but like I always look at teams, the more double-digit scorers you have, the better you are. Because in college basketball, that's the name of the game. You might have one takeover guy and everyone else is kind of just a role player. And this team is 4 or 5 guys that can all give you 10 points on any given night. That's kind of like a death by 1,000 cuts. They don't need a 30-point scorer. They just need 6 different guys who give you 8 to 15, and then you end up losing by 10 because everybody hurt you.
Right. And Nunji and Fremantle can also score inside efficiently as well.
Yeah.
I mean, they're big, strong guys.
Big dudes.
Yeah. So that's why we have Xavier in our top 20, and their first test will be against Indiana at the GABA games. They will host Indiana. So next up, we're staying in the Midwest here. Next up is Michigan at number 21. Michigan's got a lot of people to replace, but they've been recruiting really well under Juwan Howard. So, but they lost Eli Brooks, Devontae Jones, which was basically their starting backcourt, Caleb Houston, the big wing who was drafted by the Magic. He really wasn't overly productive for them last year. Musa Diabate was productive for Michigan for sure, at least much more efficient than Caleb Houston. He was picked up. He's on a 2-way with the Clippers. He was also drafted. So those are the big losses, but they also lost Frankie Collins, who was considered kind of like the heir apparent to be their point guard, and he transferred to Arizona State. So what's left? Well, you have Hunter Dickerson, who's one of the best centers in the country, and he has been getting better and better at stretching the floor. The question is, as a pro prospect is his foot speed. Does he have what it takes? But he definitely, to me, is a player of the year candidate. Excellent college ball player. The rest is kind of like new guys. I mean, they do have Kobe Buffkin, who was a freshman last year, didn't get a lot of playing time, but had some moments. And he's a combo guard. And again, this is one of those teams like, who's going to be the point guard? So what they have incoming is a bunch of pretty highly regarded freshmen, including Howard's son, Jet Howard, top 50 recruit. He's a small forward, and I'm very impressed with his game. Very polished game. 3-level score type. They have Terrace Reed coming in at center. Obviously, he probably won't get a lot of playing time behind Dickinson, but he's a top 40 recruit. They also have Jalen Llewellyn, a combo guard who was a top 100 guy. And they also have transferred Joey Baker from Duke, who was a top 40 recruit back in the day. He's now a super senior. Baker can really shoot, and he just never got much of a chance to play consistent minutes at Duke. Also, another freshman top 100 guy might be another option. A point guard would be Doug D-U-G McDaniel. So I guess my question is, who the hell is going to play point guard for Michigan? And I'm not even sure they know at this point.
Yeah, I have a hard time getting excited about this squad. Part of it, I don't know a lot about the guys because, I mean, outside of Hunter Dickinson, you look at it like, are you really, really excited? Any of these names really catch your eye? I mean, he's a player of the year candidate. I don't know. I'm kind of indifferent. I mean, again, this is another situation similar to Indiana. I just think Indiana's better. But like, you have a player of the year candidate, you have a guy that is one of the best players in the country that keeps you relevant. I just think that they lost too much that I'm familiar with for me to be confident ranking them. There's actually teams below them that I like a lot more that we'll get to. But again, Hunter's the type of guy in college ball, at least, he's going to win you a few games because he's going to have a 25-point, 15-rebound game and you win on his back.
Yeah, I think Howard is going to be their second best scorer. And I think he's got talent. So, but you still need somebody to run the show, and they lost. You lost your 3 point guards from last year.
Yeah, you lost your 2 starters and the guy who was supposed to start along. Yeah, that doesn't bode well for you. We've been talking about guard play a lot tonight, and you just lost your 2 best ones and the guy who was supposed to fill the role with them leaving.
Right.
Yeah, you lose Brooks and Jones, and then you lose Collins, who's supposed to kind of alleviate that stress. I don't know.
So their first matchup is a very interesting one, and their first interesting matchup is against Eastern Michigan. Why is that? Why do we have Eastern Michigan on here? Because that's Imoni Bates' team. So we want to see, I mean, really, seriously, Imoni Bates is going to have many chances to prove himself, and this will be one of those times.
We'll see.
So at number 22, we return back to the ACC with the Miami Hurricanes, who surprised a lot of people last year in the NCAA tournament with their explosive 3-guard attack with Charlie Moore, Cameron McGusty, and Isaiah Wong. Unfortunately, McGusty and Moore have moved on, and so has Sam Wardenberg, who also played very well down the stretch for them. He was a stretch big, played power forward, center. He's moved on to play professionally in Australia. Now, so what do they have coming back? This is the good news. And maybe this team might be a little underrated because Wong is a great creator, great shot creator. Needs to be more efficient, but boy, can this guy create shots. And he makes some amazing plays at the rim and just shot creation in general. And they also have another guy to pair him with in Nigel Pack, who is a little jitterbug, and he too can shoot. And then probably their most interesting player is Norshad Omir, who is a transfer from Arkansas State. Now, obviously, he's moving up big time competition, and he's not really a proven 3-point shooter. But at Arkansas State last year, he averaged 18 points a game, 63% from the field. averaged 12.2 rebounds per game, 1.6 steals per game, and 1.9 blocks per game. And he is I believe he's 6'7", muscular type power forward. So a little undersized in height, but he definitely has the bulk to bang down low. So he's going to be their new big man. A little different, obviously, than Wardenberg, who was he was a deadly outside shooter. Jordan Miller, who also played well in the tournament, returns. He's a athletic wing, plays good defense. And then the fifth guy in this team is probably going to be one of my favorite names in college basketball, Wooga Poplar, who was an unheralded freshman last year, got some playing time, wasn't outstanding, but yeah, he's right now. I heard he played well in his last exhibition game, and he's probably going to be their small forward. And if he can team up with Wong and Pack, this team has the makings of national champion. No, but can they compete with teams like Virginia? For that. They're not going to be up there with North Carolina, probably not going to be up there with Duke, but they're probably going to be that next level team.
I love their backcourt. That Nigel Pack get was big for them. I think Wong and Pack are probably, in terms of just the 1 and the 2, not including like a third guard on the wing, or I think that they have one of the best 1-2 combos. I love what they both bring. Hopefully Nigel becomes a little bit more of a playmaker. He only averaged, I think, 2 or 3 assists, but Kansas State wasn't great. He was just their best player. So maybe his scoring takes a slight step back. He was at about 17, 18 a game, but I'd love to see him score 14, 15 points, dish out 5 or 6 assists, and Wong just to kind of do what he does. I mean, last year he was at, I think, 16, 17 points a game, give or take. Not much of it. His 3-point shot has been spotty. You look at his career, and it's like last year he was right around 30% on about 4 a game when I'm looking at the stats. The year before, he was at 5 a game and was at like 35%. You can work with that. And then his freshman year, he was at like 37%, but his volume was horrible. I think he took like 1 a game. So that's kind of thrown out the window. So if he can get a little bit more to that 35% Isaiah Wong, keep his scoring around that 18 a game, play off of Nigel, let Nigel run the point, let Nigel be the decision maker. That's a 1-2 punch that most teams aren't going to want to see. And then, yeah, I think the rest of the team around them is solid. Like, they made a surprise run last year. Maybe it wasn't so much of a surprise because they're actually better than I think we gave them credit for. And I think last year we all got caught up in the ACC is down, the ACC is down. It's like, no, this is actually a pretty good team. And, I think that if you look at the rest of this team, it's like, yeah, but they're returning quite a few players. Like, there's a lot of guys that are coming back, or at least that are proven college players that have now got a year or 2 under their belt. I think this is a good team. I think 22 might even be kind of low for them. McGusty and Moore are going to be hard. All 3 of them are. Wardenberg, McGusty, and Moore aren't someone you just replace. Those guys are averaging, quite a few points per game if you total them up. But that 1-2 punch at the guard is good. And if the rest of the team comes along for the ride, this team could creep into the top, I would say up into that 15 range. And I wouldn't be shocked.
I just wanted to add that Nigel Pack shot last year, almost 44% from 3, pairing along with Isaiah Wong. The team overall is pretty small, but I think that more of a fast-paced, small team fits really well with that 1-2 punch that Drew was on about and that we've talked about with the Hurricanes. So I like the team. I'm pretty excited to watch Nigel Pack and Isaiah Wong. And I think that the small ball fits them better.
Yeah. What made this team ultra dangerous last year was they did play small ball. They could go 5 out. I don't think they can do that with O'Meara unless he has a shot that I'm not aware of. Might not have the same success because teams just aren't used to playing, 5-out teams where everybody can shoot. And I'm not so sure they have that this year. But I think Pack is arguably better than Charlie Moore. And Jordan Miller, I think, is ready to take he's been slowly progressing. So I think he's ready to take another step. So moving on, this is a team we talked to our guest about, and that's Texas Tech. And Texas Tech lost a lot. I suppose the positive is that Texas Tech was a very balanced team where, a lot of people contributed. They didn't really have any stars. And that's what they lost was Bryson Williams, Shannon Jr. went to Illinois, Kevin McClure went to Kansas, Davion Warren, Adonis Arms, and Marcus Santos Silva, big reserve center. So what they have coming in to replace those guys, first of all, the main guy returning is Kevin O'Banner, who you remember played with Oral Roberts and helped them shock Ohio State. Yep. And then they have a bunch of new guys coming in. The other holdover is probably their best player, and that's Daniel Bacho, excuse me. And guy's got great footwork. I think he can develop into a stretch four, and he started at Arizona. So he definitely flashed at times last year, and all reports coming out of Texas Tech, including our guest, is saying, he's looking great. And they're going to need him because their biggest transfer, Fardaz Amik from Utah State, who is a rebounding machine, but unfortunately, he is injured and is not expected to be ready for some time. So, again, we talked a lot about this team with our guests, but a couple of things we didn't mention was they also have two other transfer guards that, they have Kerwin Walton coming in from North Carolina, who was a three-point specialist, and Davion Harmon, who bounced around, started at Oklahoma, then he went to Oregon, but he's a combo guard. Was a top 50 recruit when he was a freshman. And we know that Texas Tech is one of those teams that plays better as a whole than they do. The whole is greater than the sum of its parts. Maverick, do you have any thoughts on Texas Tech? I mean, it's 23. Is that fair to them? Are we low? Are we high?
Well, I think Matthew made a lot of great points about Tech. I guess my only issue is their guard with Harmon. And I'm pretty confident that he's going to be running the point, but he's more of a, we have him listed as a combo guard because he's not really a facilitator by any means necessary. Right. I mean, last season he put up 2.1 assists on 1.5 turnovers. I mean, and he's going to be taking over your point guard position. That's kind of tough. That's a pretty big red flag. I mean, I know that Texas Tech has a great system, but having a good point guard is key to success. I mean, that's going to be running your whole offense. You're going to have an inefficient shoot first player run your offense with all these talented and athletic wings, and I mean AMAC too as a big. I don't know.
Well, I actually heard that they are considering. And I don't know if this is good or bad, but they definitely realize that this is an issue. And they're considering starting unheralded freshman Richard Isaacs at point guard. Now, he was a top 80 guy, but again, freshman, not highly regarded, and he might be their starter at point guard. So, you hit the nail on the head. Even if AMAC, you figure they're going to get good play up front with AMAC and Bacho. And O'Banner. But the question is the point, and they may have to turn to Isaac, so we shall see. Their first big matchup will be in the Maui Classic versus Creighton on November 21st. Now, another one of our favorite teams we talked about a lot this summer is the Dayton Flyers. We had Deron Holmes on the show. And we consider Deron a borderline first-round pick this year on our draft board. We have him at number 30 right now. and he's backed up by, or not backed up, but complemented by a fellow sophomore and Malachi Smith, who's a great playmaker, had a fantastic freshman season. Unfortunately, he's a little banged up right now. Also, they have Mongolian Mike, who we talked a lot about this summer, who's kind of a do-everything, type of guy, like a Franz Wagner type of player. Monty Camara, who was a highly touted, power forward at Georgia. He hasn't quite lived up to his potential, but they also have another sophomore that played really well last year, and Kobe Bray, who's a 3-point specialist. So, my one concern is depth on this team, especially in their bigs, because after Kamara and Holmes, they really don't have anything. They do have pretty good depth at the guard spots and the wing spots, but the bigs, they're basically got to keep Holmes and Kamara healthy. I mean, they can afford to lose one of those guys for a little bit, but they can't. They're going to struggle, especially if something happened to Holmes. They would definitely struggle. So, do we have any thoughts on Dayton? I mean, I know we talked about this summer about them being a Sweet 16.
I love this squad.
Yeah.
I really do love this team. Part of that's, I've done a deep dive onto them because we had Duran, then I did a scout on Duran, did a scout on Kamara, did a scout on Malachi. I just really like this team. I think, yes, are they a bit thin in terms of roster depth? Absolutely. A lot of these kind of mid-major teams outside of the Zags generally are. They usually might be able to roll out a solid 5 or 6, and then they get a little bit wary there. But man, I think Duran is one of the most underrated players in the country. Sorry, my light just burned out. Fantastic. My house is haunted. The Halloween spirit just a couple of days late. But no, I think a big Duran Holmes fan. I mean, I love the kid. I think he's one of the best rim protectors in the country. Plays hard. Is what we statistically was the second best finisher at the rim in the country, Rich, if I'm not mistaken, when we did a deep dive on him.
Yeah, I don't remember exactly.
Yeah, he was like an elite finisher at the rim. I mean, you watch him play and you see the athleticism pop. Great set, just great kid too. On our interview, go back and watch it, people. Just listen to him talk. Like, great head on his shoulders. I think Malachi Smith, another super underrated player as a playmaker. Offensively, there's some concern because he shot 40% from the field, but he also shot 40% from 3. So that kind of tells you he can hit the 3 ball at a really solid clip, but you do worry about his finishing and his mid-range game. But he's a great playmaker. When you have guys like Holmes and Tumani running around, you kind of need someone to set them up because they're not individual playmakers. They are bigs. Mongolian Mike, I know that Rich and I have gone in and looked at him after having Duran on the show, and we kind of got to hear more about him. I think he's going to be a really solid player for this team. I think he's going to come in and give them a bit of everything. I mean, Rich kind of said it, a glue guy, a Franz Wagner. I can totally see it being at like 12, 13 points, 4 or 5 rebounds, 3 or 4 assists, maybe a steal, maybe a block, and just do everything. And then, Tumani got, I think, a bad rap at Georgia. Like, he definitely underperformed his first 2 years there, if you look. But the one thing I give him credit for is when I went back and looked at him, he's gotten better every year in some capacity. Like, his scoring dipped a little bit once he got to Dayton, but his shooting percentage jumped by 3 points up to 51%. His 3-point percentage jumped from 26% to almost 34%. Like, the rebounding has stayed relatively the same. Like, he's gotten better in some aspect of his game, particularly on offense every year. And if he can make one more senior jump and maybe get to like 14 or 15 points a game and maybe get his 3-point percentage to kind of be solid at like 35, I think he's a solid player that just didn't live up to the hype at Georgia, but found a way to make his mark here at Dayton. I just really like this team. Obviously, they're a bit frail in terms of what happens if one of the big 3 go down, kind of get concerned. But I think this team is always going to be competitive because you have a really solid core, and that solid core does the things you need good basketball players to do. Duran defends and finishes. Kamara does a little bit of everything, solid athlete. Malachi is a traditional point guard who can hit the 3, and Mike does a little bit of everything. Those 4 healthy, this team is competitive.
And Bray is I don't know if he'll start for them. He probably won't, because RJ Blakely he's almost 25 years old.
He's
24 and a half years old, and he's probably going to start at the wing. But Bray can come off the bench and he'll knock down the three. So
sometimes all you need is 7 guys. If you in college basketball, sometimes all you need is 6 or 7 guys to just the right 6 or 7 to stay healthy, and you can make a run. And I think this team's going to be able to do it.
Right. And their first test will be on November 11th. That will be at home. They'll be hosting SMU. SMU is another rebuilding program, but they had a good recruiting year. I think they also have a couple decent transfers coming in. So SMU should be at least a mid-level team in the AAC. So that's on November 11th. So our last team, and this is another team that wasn't picked by the coaches of the AP to finish in the top 25, but a team that I think, and that's probably because the coach is coming from Drew's alma mater, USF, Todd Golden, and he's his first year, not as a coach, but his first year at Florida. So maybe they're thinking, there's going to be some transitional issues, but yeah. So who they lose? They lost Keontae Johnson, who didn't really play last year, and he's going to be at Kansas State. Flanders Fleming, who was a kind of a defensive guy. Tyree Appleby, who was a nice little point guard, little speedy point guard, and Anthony Derugi, who was another long defensive forward. So it was a very defensive-oriented team last year, with the exception of Colin Castleton, their center. Now, Castleton, I think, has a chance to be in the Player of the Year discussion in the SEC. And he, too, is starting to develop an outside shot. And he's definitely one of those guys that can easily give you 20 points a night, will block shots, will rebound, and definitely one of the better centers in college basketball. Then they have an interesting transfer in super senior Kyle Lofton from St. Bonnie's, and he is a very good floor general, great, playmaker, not the best offensive player, but he's not going to kill you. And then they have an interesting combination of, they have kind of 2 of everything here. Like, for example, in terms of athletic forwards, they have transfer Alex Fudge from LSU and BC transfer, who transferred in last year, CJ Felder. Felder is a great defensive player, and he's shown some offensive brilliance at times. I can remember him 2-3 years ago, had a huge game against Duke. Duke couldn't stop him, but he didn't really get a chance to show the offense. This year, he'll be able to do that, and he might emerge as a draft prospect out of nowhere. Fudge is a super athlete, but he's raw, and he'll might not even start, at least at the beginning of the season. They also have Will Richard, who was had a very solid sophomore year last year at Belmont. But a lot of people were impressed with him, think he has pro potential. He's a wing, and they also have a holdover. Oh, goodness. I don't know how to say Mr. Reeves' first name. Is it Kawaki? Kawaki, I think it is.
I think it's either Kawaki or Kawachi. And I think Kawaki sounds better.
And he comes in. Right. He didn't play a tremendous amount last year, but he has a reputation. Another one of those Florida athletic defending type guys who maybe struggles on the offensive end. And then they have Marion Jones, who came in last year from Penn State. He can really light it up for 3 when he's on. A little bit streaky, but he's definitely going to be one of the better shooters on this team. And I think overall, I think you have an interesting collection of athleticism. You got a solid scorer in Castleton who you could count on. I think Felder's going to emerge. I think Myron Jones will give them consistent scoring from deep. And you got a lot of other guys that are good defenders.
This is a really interesting team because for Florida as a program, you look at this team and it's going to be very interesting looking in the future what Golden's able to do. Like this is a team that's pretty old. Like the only two freshmen we have on here are Riley Cudgel, and then Denzel Aberdeen. Neither of those guys project to be really big factors on this roster, at least looking at it right now. So I'm really curious to see how Golden recruits now that he's in a big Power 5 conference where sports is king and basketball is second to only football, because this is a team this is a lot of veterans. So that will be interesting for the future. This team goes the way of the super senior, in my opinion. I think Castleton's a solid. Castleton, you're getting 16 points, 8-10 rebounds a game, a couple blocks. You plug him in, good to go. Lofton will be interesting. I think they're going to need him to be he wasn't bad offensively, but I think they need him to just be a little bit more efficient. His last year at the Bonnies, he was at 40% from the field. Not great. I mean, he really never eclipsed 42%. Like, actually, yeah, 43%, 44% his freshman year is his field goal high. Not really a shooter, but the playmaking helps. I mean, we're talking a guy who had 6 assists last year. I think he's going to need to take up a big role. And I think Marion Jones is really interesting because he really struggled once he came to Florida and he left Penn State. Like, you look at his averages from his first year at Florida last year to his last year at Penn State, his junior year, his points dropped from 15 to 8. His field goal percentage dropped from 39 to 35. His 3-point percentage dropped from 39.5 to 32 on the same volume. He's not really a playmaker. He's not really a rebounder. So, like,
no, he's a shooter. He's a shooter.
He's a shooter. But last year he was a pretty crappy shooter.
Right. Under a different type of coach. But trust me,
yes,
Marion Jones can fill it up. I saw him many a night for Penn State.
Yeah, no, I agree. Like, you look at his sophomore and junior year at Penn State, and you're looking at a guy that sophomore year, 40% from 3, 5.5 attempts a game, average 13 a game. Very nice numbers. Junior year, 39.5% from 3. We'll call it 40 on 6 attempts a game for 16 points a game almost. If he plays like that, this team's got a really nice 3 super senior core that has playmaking, has rim protection, shoot. Like, they do everything you want from, veteran players. Right. But there's just questions. Can Lofton be enough of an offensive threat where he's not like a liability?
Can Fudge be an offensive threat? Because he's got NBA athleticism.
Yeah, but can you do something with it?
Right.
And then can Jones space the floor? Because if Jones can space the floor, you got a legitimate 6 attempt, 7 attempt a game shooter who can him at 38, 39, 40%. But if he's at 32%, you're like, Jesus, you don't really give me much else. So this team's got 3 super seniors and Alex Fudge. If those dudes all play to their potential, and Castleton, I think, is a no-brainer. I think he will. If the other 3 come along for the ride, this team will probably I think this team will climb a bit higher than we have them.
The team I like, or the player I really like on this team, and might turn out to be their best player, is CJ Felder. I think Felder could be the best player on this team, just like Jones. He really struggled offensively coming from BC, and then and he really was starting to blossom as an offensive player at BC. And he goes to Florida, and all of a sudden he disappears. And the same thing happened with Marion Jones to some degree. And I think Mike White's system that, really emphasized defense. I don't know, Mike White was never the type of guy that really was about offense. He was really all about defense. Yeah. And it seemed to hurt these guys, development as offensive players. So, yeah. But watch it. Keep an eye on Felder. He might be the best player on this team. So Florida's first real matchup will be against arch rival Florida State at Florida State on November 18th. All righty. So that wraps up our top 25. And now we're going to move on to our season predictions. And I am actually going to make a change here on the fly. Well, Drew, you want to read off the categories while I make a change here?
Yes. So, ladies and gentlemen, we will be covering on our early predictions here a Sweet 16 surprise. So that's probably going to be teams that we have ranked at the very bottom of our top 25, if not outside of our top 25. Then we're going to do 4 Final Four teams, a national champion, a player of the year, a coach of the year, and a top freshman of the year.
All righty. You want to give us your picks? We're going to start off with yours?
My Sweet 16 surprise, technically we had best of the rest category where we did teams 26 to, I think was it 32, Rich?
Yeah. Well, no, my pick actually was pick I think we have them ranked like 35th.
35th. Okay, so I went with Dayton. It's a bit of a cheating because they're in our top 25, but I love the team. I love what they offer. If they stay healthy, you look at that team. They really went on a run last year. They got screwed out of the tournament. I'll die on that hill. That LaSalle game should not have cost them what it cost them. But, I think Dayton makes a run to the Sweet 16. My Final Four, I'm going to go UNC, Gonzaga, shocker there. The Tennessee Volunteers in Houston. I'm going to be one of those Zags fans who I'm just going to keep beating the table. This is the year. We're going to win it this year. Player of the year, I got to give it to Drew Timme. That's my guy. I ride and die. Just if we ever post pictures, just know during March, folks, I'm growing out the Drew Timme handlebar mustache. I did it last year. Coach of the year, I'm going Kelvin Sampson. Main reason is because when you look at who lost, you can make the argument they lost the most out of a lot of the teams we covered. And yet we still have them at 6. I still have them making a Final Four run. If that team surpasses expectations as they have now 2 years in a row and continues to do so with what they lost, 4 double-digit scorers, veteran players, their bigs, all that. Yeah, man, there's no reason Sampson isn't Coach of the Year. And top freshman, I'm going to go with Casson Wallace from Kentucky. That's my guy, favorite high school player of the last class to, enter the NCAA. I think he's an absolute stud. I'm going to give it to him because I think he is better than Ty, and Ty was highly touted, and I'm taking him over him. So he's going to be, every year Calipari has 1 or 2 freshmen that he leans on heavily midway through the season. Wallace is going to be that guy.
Okay. How about you, Mav? What do you got for us?
Well, if anyone's surprised with my Sweet 16 pick, you just don't know me. I'm going Texas A&M, one of the biggest snubs of all time last year. We lost our star, but we're coming back. Just like everyone else, I have UNC in the Final Four. I have Gonzaga, and I also have Houston. My only difference is I have Kentucky in the Final Four. I think that their defensive potential is, like I said at the beginning of the show, it's out of this world. I think that's really going to help them in the tournament. Player of the year, I got Drew Timme. The coach of the year, I have Jamie Dixon. And the reason for that is when we had an interview, I actually changed this answer because I was going to pick Kelvin Sampson. But when we talked to Matthew and how much confidence that he has in his players, they're coming in with vets. They have experience. I think TCU is going to be a really good team this year, and I think Jamie Dixon is going to get the recognition he deserves. And the top freshman, I have Kentucky in the Final Four. I'm going to put Carson Wallace in there. Someone they're going to rely on heavily at that guard position on both ends, and I think he's going to come out. Alrighty. So a lot of similarities and some interesting differences. So my surprise team, we have them. By the way, A&M, I believe, was 34th in our rankings, and I'm picking the team right behind them, another SEC team, and that's the LSU Tigers. And they lost some really good players from last year's squad because of the coaching change. The biggest loss was Tyree Eason, but they also lost Darius Days, Brandon Murray, Xavier Pinson, Eric Gaines, Efton Reed, and Alex Fudge, who we just got done talking about, went to Florida. Why do I like these guys? Well, a lot of people are not giving, LSU much of a chance. Will Wade's gone. Matt McMahon comes in from Murray State. But here's the interesting thing about this coaching change. He brought his 3 best players from Murray State with him. Conference Player of the Year, KJ Williams, a power forward, Justin Hill, who's a really very good point guard, and Trey Hannibal, who's a very athletic shooting guard. And these guys join Adam Miller, who you will remember, who played for Illinois 2 years ago, had a very nice freshman season. He was hurt last year. He comes back. He should be starting, and they also have a top 40 freshman in Tyrell Ward. He's kind of a wiry wing. Reminds me, he's kind of similar to me to Arsenault from Houston. I don't think he's as good, but yeah. So, and this team also has
Mwani Wilkinson, who's a steady player for LSU last year. They bring in Cam Hayes, who was a pretty respected recruit from NC State who transferred in. And they also have Justice Williams, who didn't play much last year, sophomore, but he too was a top 60 recruit. So, and Jalen Reed, who might start at center for them, unless they go small ball, who was a top 70 recruit. So the bottom line is they have a nice mix of Murray State players who already know the system. And then you mix these Murray State players with some high-level recruits. I think LSU has a chance to make some noise. They won't win the SEC. They probably won't win the SEC tournament. But if they manage to get enough wins to get in the NCAA tournament, I think this team might just surprise, catch a couple teams sleeping, and could sneak into the Sweet 16. So then when my Final Four, like you guys, I went with UNC. Like you guys, I went with Gonzaga. And like you guys, I went with Houston. However, where Maverick took Kentucky and Drew took Tennessee, I also took Tennessee. I love the Volunteers this year. So my national championship, we all have a different pick here. I'm taking UNC. I'm sticking with them. And we all picked the same guy for Player of the Year, Drew Timme. I also went with Drew for the Coach of the Year, Calvin Sampson. And lastly, I changed this pick. Admittedly, I had Brandon Miller from Alabama. And one of the reasons why I liked Alabama is because I think Brandon Miller has a chance to lead that team in scoring. However, because he's a year older, maybe even a year and a half older than your average freshman, I thought, he's going to be more ready to play. But then, we were talking about UCLA, and I was thinking, damn, Amari Bailey's really got to carry this team for them to be good. And I do like, Amari Bailey's dynamic play. I think he could rack up big numbers. So no, we're not picking like the first overall draft pick. We're picking who we think is going to be the most productive freshman of the year. And I'm going to go with Amari Bailey, because if he doesn't play well, UCLA is probably going to be a mediocre team.
Agreed.
All righty. So now our favorite part of the show, and then we'll be done, folks. We're going is our mailbag. Hugo. And I happen to know Hugo's in Milwaukee. Wants to know, who makes the move to get worse faster, the Spurs or the Jazz?
I'm going to say Jazz, because they're going to have to. I think the Spurs are just bad and they're going to be bad. I think the Jazz have to get worse because, like Rich,
because they're pretty good.
Yeah, like I got to give you credit. I was one of the people who was like, I just don't think the Jazz are going to be that good, because I just don't know if they're all going to buy in, and this might turn into a team of a bunch of mercenaries. But hey, they bought in and they all look great, so they're going to have to probably move.
And the team actually looks happy. I mean,
they'll have to move off of. They're going to have to move, like I said, one of Clarkson, one of Beasley. The thing is I'd want to keep Sexton and I'd want to keep Marketing, because those are young guys still. Yeah, those are building block players. Like. So it's going to be, they're going to have to move.
And Olynyk and Markkanen really play well off of each other.
Because they can spread the floor, they can shoot. Right. They're tougher than they get credit for. They're not elite rebounders, but they play hard. So they will have to.
Well, they don't need the elite rebounding, because they also acquired Jared Vanderbilt, who grabs all the rebounds.
Yeah. So they're. I'm going to give the Jazz credit and Rich credit. He called it. They're better than I thought. They'll level out. I mean, I'm not saying they're a playoff team. I still think they're more of a play-in at best. But they've surprised me. I thought that was a team that would contend for worse in the league. They look good. Spurs actually do kind of suck.
Yeah, I think the Spurs are going to contend for the worst record in the league, and they won't even have to try. You agree with this, Maverick?
I think the Jazz are gonna make the move, but let's not overrate the Jazz now. I mean, we're 8 games in, man.
He's a Jazz hater.
Come on, I'm a stubborn man, but I am going to tell you right now. I think that Mike Conley is the one that's going to get moved, and I think Malik Beasley is going to get sent with him. And I think they're going to LA. I think that's going to be the move that's going to be end up.
Yeah, that's what LA needs, more point guards.
Yeah, but
old point guards.
Conley's been playing really. Conley's been playing really well, and I think Beasley. I mean, he's a good shooter too.
Yep.
If they give up those
He's a 6th man of the year type of guy.
Yeah, if LA gives up those 2 picks, I mean, that's a deal I think will be.
Oh yeah, well, hell yeah, I'll give up 1st-round picks for those guys. If the Jazz actually want to try to build with this core, keeping Conley makes sense because Sexton has a tendency to play under control, and who better, to tutor him, bring him along than Mike Conley. But they can afford to get rid of Beasley or Clarkson, and I would think it would be Beasley. Because I'd like to see them get some playing time for Ochai Agbaji, So, all right. So next question, Lucas wants to know, could the Lakers or Nets be tanking on purpose? Well, I know the answer to this question is absolutely not.
They have no picks.
Right. Exactly. Well, they do have picks, but they're pick swaps. So the worst they do, in the case of the Lakers, the worst they do, it benefits the Pelicans. The worst the Nets do, it benefits the Rockets.
Yeah.
So no,
they're not tanking.
They're not
no
taking
way,
on purpose unless they plan to move to Houston and Orleans.
Yeah.
All right. So Cameron wants to know, how much stock do you put in the Vols beating the Zags in an exhibition game? Well, I know Gonzaga's defense. We talked about this when we break it down. Gonzaga, we said they got to replace, Chad's, rim protection, and defense let them down in that game. So yeah, I'm a little concerned. I mean, I didn't move them from being number 2, but it certainly makes me feel a lot better about putting Tennessee at number 4.
I think it says more about Tennessee than it does about the Zags. I think Tennessee actually kind of disappointed last year. This is a game that I think that in their heads was their first real game. Like, I really do think Tennessee looked at this like, no, this is a national contender. We view ourselves the same way. And I think they just got up for it. Whereas I think the Zags were like, it's an exhibition game. We're just going to platoon swap people, just put out every 5-6 minutes, rotate. I'm not saying that the Zags didn't try and that it means nothing, but it doesn't really bother me. I think it just says more about Tennessee being a really good team than it does about the Zags getting ready to like flame out and, lose in the first round or something.
Right. All right. The last question was specifically directed at me and somebody who's definitely been listening to the show going back to last year. You guys weren't even on that episode, but when Juwan Howard
punched the coach.
He punched the coach. I really thought that was terrible. And so the question is, why did you freak out about Juwan Howard throwing a punch last season, but you're okay with Draymond clocking Poole, meaning Draymond, punching Jordan Poole at practice? Well, to me, it's two totally different situations. One happens in the heat of combat, in the heat of practice, and we discussed Jordan Poole being a talker, and Draymond's probably not too happy that he's getting big, Poole's getting big money and other people are getting big money and he's not getting his contract. So, do I condone Draymond punching Poole? No, but I don't really know what happened. And in knowing how Jordan Poole runs his mouth, maybe he kind of deserved it. I don't know. But with the Juwan Howard thing, to me, what was awful about that was not so much that Howard hit somebody, it was that his players were actually in between him and they got involved. And and the crowd almost got involved. One of those kids seriously could have gotten hurt. And in the crowd, somebody in the crowd could have gotten hurt. It had disaster written all over it. And Howard, unlike Draymond, is in charge of taking care of these kids. He's in charge of being a leader, setting an example. And there, to me, he just did the worst possible thing. Well, not the worst possible thing, but I mean, it was just
it was horrible. It was a bad look. Really bad look. It had Malice in the Palace vibes, kind of not to that extreme,
right.
But like
the crowd. I'm telling you, the crowd almost got involved.
Yeah, it wasn't that extreme because a player didn't like go into the stands, but it definitely was not a good look. But
the players did get involved because
but the players did.
A couple of Michigan players got suspended. So to add to that mess, do you agree with me that Juwan Howard punching a fellow coach and getting his players involved and almost getting the crowd involved is a hell of a lot different than Draymond punching Poole at practice.
Yeah, it's absolutely different. But I think they're both are bad in different ways. You know, you talked about being a leader for the kids. Draymond is just as much of a leader for his team, and to do that to a young player in front of the other young players that are supposed to be making that big of an impact, it's not a good look. I mean, you're kind of seeing it early on. It's just two different situations that are bad.
I agree, but Draymond's a leader for professional basketball players who are supposed to be theoretically men. Okay. College players are still considered children.
Yeah.
And most of them, live at home and, still listen to their parents, and, they're not completely on their own yet. And their parents entrust that coach to take care of them, not to get them involved in fights. So,
especially traveling around the country. Yeah.
Yeah.
I understand.
Right. So, Megan, I do think they're different. I'm not condoning punching anybody, but if Jordan Poole ever runs his mouth off to me, no, just joking. All right. You have any final thoughts? Mav, you look like you're ready to fall asleep on me. I know it's been a long episode and a long day.
Long episode, but great episode.
Right. All right. Well, great questions again this week, folks. Appreciate it. As always, keep on sending those questions to admin, ADMIN, at hoopsprospects.com. We try to answer as many as we can. I want to thank all of our listeners and our special guest, Matthew Postins, who is very informative on the Big 12. We will be back next week to discuss the first week of college basketball, who's done well, who hasn't done well. And we will also have special features on both the Arizona and Villanova Wildcats. And that's it, folks. We're done.
Sorry, guys. I literally put my phone down and ran to take a piss.
That's completely all right. I just wanted to see if you had any final thoughts. That was it.
No, I'm good.
Yeah. We've done plenty of talking.